Hey folks, welcome to part 1 of the Star Citizen timeline. This video series is meant to act as sort of a primer on the Star Citizen lore. So I'll be going through the timeline in terms of territory, so things like exploration and wars, but I'll also touch on other things that tie into that as well. However, don't be surprised if I don't talk about your favourite ship, weapon, technology, company, etc., as these would be a better subject for a future lore series that builds on top of this one. So I've been working on a project like this for quite some time, and I found it's just way too easy to go overboard with content. There is a lot of Star Citizen lore, so the idea here is to try and break it down in a simple way as possible, and convey to you in a single series the history of the verse. Now, it's not going to be that useful for this first video, but later on I'm going to be using a modified version of Selbie's Galactic Transport Network Map. There are several fantastic maps that have been made by the community, but I think this one works particularly well for portraying faction territory in a meaningful way. So let's get started. The current year in Star Citizen is 2948. If I'd recorded this video in 2019, however, the current year would be 2949. However, Squadron 42 is set specifically in 2945. As of any of these years, there are over 100 known star systems, 5 known spacefaring alien species, and a whole lot of planets, moons, asteroids, space stations, and more. So let's go back to a simpler time, not so long from our reality of 2018, where all of humanity lives on Earth. We've never ventured outside of our solar system, and we've never encountered alien life. In the 21st century, Earth is reaching a critical mass of overpopulation. Numerous wars erupt across the planet as the populace faces food, water, and energy shortages. In 2038, Roberts Space Industries, or RSI, is officially formed by a young and enterprising inventor called Chris Roberts, nod nod wink wink. In 2061, Roberts begins sowing the seeds of terraforming technology, but it's a long and arduous project. In 2075, Dr. Scott Childress and his team at RSI unveil their prototype quantum core engine to the military, capable of 1/100th the speed of light. As time goes on, civilians and various industries begin petitioning to have the technology made available to the private sector. In 2108, Chris Roberts dies, not having completed his ambitious goal of terraforming a planet, but luckily in 2113, under the leadership of a CEO with a similar vision to Roberts, RSI unveil the world's first Atmo processor, laying the groundwork for terraforming a world. With the technology in place, governments, corporations, and scientific minds of the world come together to create a global initiative focused on terraforming Mars to relieve the population problem on Earth. Around this time, a settlement is built on the Moon, or Luna as it's later called due to ambiguity. However, this settlement is only a short-term fix for the overpopulation issue. In 2120, after years of simulations and tests, the governments of the world pool their knowledge and resources to attempt to terraform Mars. Teams of surveyors are dispatched to the planet's surface to generate topographical maps to decide on Atmo processor placement and to test surface samples for possible contaminants to the atmosphere. It's our first top-to-bottom exploration of our nearest planet. In 2125, an oxygen-sustaining environment has been in place on Mars for 2 weeks now, and while the scientific community on the planet are still vetting the system, they're just 2 days away from officially declaring the planet secure. Unfortunately, confidence in the atmosphere means that none of the crew are wearing the appropriate breathing apparatus. While technically a violation of operating protocol, there's no indication to assume that the atmosphere is anything but safe. While the exact details of the incident are unclear, it's at this point that there's a technical error in the terraforming process. Whatever happens does so at such a speed that no one is able to sound an alarm or seal the ventilation of the various facilities around the planet, before 4,876 people tragically die. There's no time to mourn, however, and work must continue on the Mars project due to the pressing timeline of overpopulation. Following the Mars tragedy, RSI built a prototype spacecraft called the Zeus to address the Terraforming Division's efforts to transport resources to Mars. RSI have been listening to the civilian petitions and worked to streamline the quantum drive enough to make it commercially viable. In 2140, after numerous setbacks, RSI unveiled the Zeus to the public, a short-range exploration craft and the first commercially available spaceship equipped with a quantum drive. Needless to say, this totally shakes up the market. Although the drives at the time are capable of 1/100th the speed of light, the technology evolves over time, and today they can travel at rather incredible speeds, approaching a third the speed of light. In 2157, Mars is officially declared to be an oxygen-sustaining environment. There's a big ceremony on Mars, and there's a monument placed to commemorate the lives lost during the Great Mars Tragedy. And, as if that hadn't been enough drama for one day, after the ceremony, engineering supervisor Kinna Ocon goes into labour, giving birth to her daughter Ebony, who becomes the first Martian, and by extension the first extraterrestrial human. Over time, the settlement on Mars grows into a major port city known as Port Renatus. Fast forward to 2232, and a 75-year-old Ebony Ocon is guest of honour at the launching of the Artemis, the first interstellar spaceship, a generation ship set to take a crew of 5,000 to the distant star system GJ667cc. Unfortunately, all contact with or tracking of the ship is lost after leaving the solar system. An AI core at the helm is blamed by the public, and this leads to the banning of the development of technologies such as androids, although AI will go on to be responsible for other disasters, just as it had previously been responsible for an incident with self-driving cars in Tokyo. Some today also blame the Great Mars Tragedy on AI. In 2262, federal, commercial and private spacecraft are now exploring the edges of the solar system. The Goodman, a cargo vessel making a routine supply run to an orbital platform near Neptune, is knocked off course by debris hitting the starboard engine. After drifting for several hours, the ship simply vanishes. No wreckage is found, and over the next few months 2 more ships disappear in the same area. The area is declared a no-fly zone, dubbed the Neso Triangle. Over the next few years, scientist and explorer Nick Croshaw conducts studies within the Neso Triangle, mostly consisting of trial and error. Within, he detects a location where a flow of neutrons is disappearing into nothing, like a draft through a crack in a door. Following further tests of the anomaly, it's revealed to be a fold in time and space. This phenomenon would later become known as a jump point. In 2271, after nearly 10 years of trial and error, having figured out how to get the anomaly to stay open using the emissions of an exposed fusion core, Nick Croshaw takes a leap of faith, flying through the jump point with no way of knowing what could be on the other side. After a perilous flight through the fold, he emerges on the other side and is greeted by an unfamiliar sight, one that would arguably render the technology of the Artemis obsolete. Nick Croshaw had become the first human to visit another star system, and this one would be named after him. Humanity has suddenly been given the keys to the universe, and people are quick to jump on the opportunity. The exposed fusion core setup would later be streamlined into a specialised jump drive, and many would follow in Croshaw's footsteps under the banner of nav jumpers, not just between the Croshaw system and Sol, as we start calling our system, but in search of other jump points too. Back home, shipyards are constructed on Mars's moon Deimos, and settlements pop up across the system, including one on Jupiter's moon Europa. The second and third planets in Croshaw, Angeli and Van, are terraformed and colonised. At last, Earth has a proper solution to its overcrowding, but now that the precedent has been set, expansion once again becomes a way of life for humanity, much as it was for the ancient civilizations on Earth.